For many decades, the Brentwood residence of Rob Reiner and Michelle was widely regarded as the epitome of a steadfast and enduring Hollywood union. Their children experienced a united upbringing within those walls, enveloped by affectionate gatherings and a lifestyle that exuded serenity, devotion, and invincibility. From an external perspective, it seemed that nothing could possibly disrupt the tranquility of their world. However, on the evening of December 14th, an instantaneous and cataclysmic shift occurred. Within that very home, an indescribable tragedy unfolded, claiming the lives of Rob and Michelle. When the authorities commenced their inquiry and apprehended their son Nick as a person of interest, many believed the devastating narrative had reached its conclusion. Yet, the ensuing quiet was ephemeral. Not long thereafter, Tracy Reiner, the adopted daughter whom Rob cherished as his own, came forward with revelations that sent shockwaves through the public. She alluded to an incomplete testament to sentiments her father never had the opportunity to express, to an apology that arrived too late, and to profound sorrow concealed beneath the family's meticulously crafted facade of harmony and unity. If father had been granted just one more day, Tracy articulated through her tears, perhaps none of this would have transpired. Before the public had processed her words, another voice emerged. This time it belonged to Romy, the biological daughter of Rob and Michelle. Her account presented a contrasting perspective, further intensifying the burgeoning sense of apprehension. Romy hinted that the underlying cause of the family's unraveling might have stemmed from Rob's differential treatment of his offspring, an assertion that only fanned the flames of existing suspicions. To the world, Rob Reiner was lauded not merely as a gifted filmmaker, but also as a devoted parent who prioritized his family above all else. Despite a career punctuated by iconic cinematic achievements and demanding schedules, he consistently made it a point to be present, offering guidance, nurturing, and unwavering support to his 4 children. Tracy, whom he adopted during his initial marriage, and Jake, Nick, and Romy, the 3 children he shared with his second wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were all raised under his vigilant care. His affection was not demonstrative or performative. Rather, it manifested in unwavering constancy through countless small moments that accumulated over a lifetime, from childhood through to adulthood. "You are my entire universe," he once confided to Tracy, his voice quivering with sincerity. "Regardless of what may occur, I will always stand by your side." With Tracy in particular, Rob extended boundless affection and respect. He never once made her feel less than fully his own, actively listening to her anxieties, advocating for her when necessary, and sharing quiet, ordinary moments imbued with profound significance. On tranquil evenings, he would sit with her, discussing his work, life's journey, and the challenges that lay ahead, gently reminding her that no matter how daunting the path might become, she would never have to traverse it alone. "I am aware that you possess the strength to stand independently," he once assured Tracy softly. "However, whenever you require my presence, I will always be here." Those words enveloped her in a profound sense of security, a reassurance she would never forget. With Jake, his eldest son, Rob cultivated a connection through shared enthusiasms. Foremost among these was baseball, a passion inherited from his own father, Carl Reiner. This devotion, passed from Carl to Rob and then from Rob to Jake, served as a carefully preserved legacy. Father and son embarked on journeys to numerous Major League Baseball stadiums across the nation, transforming each excursion into an experience far richer than the game itself. Rob later acknowledged that these travels were his chosen method for deepening his bond with Jake, imparting lessons of love and familial values with each passing inning. Over time, these simple excursions evolved into cherished memories, solidified by subtle gestures and hushed conversations. Rob would offer his son a smile and remark, almost in disbelief, "Sometimes I feel as though I learn just as much from you." And then there was Romy, the youngest, who received the most attentive and empathetic ear. Rob consistently made time to acknowledge her fears, her aspirations, and even her disappointments, ensuring she always felt recognized and safeguarded. "I will forever be present for you, Romy," he once declared, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter where life may lead you, I will never depart." These assurances, coupled with his warm embrace, became an emotional bedrock that remained with her long after her childhood years had passed. However, with Nick, the dynamic felt acutely different. Their relationship was characterized not by ease or warmth, but by palpable tension, lingering uncertainty, and a quiet heartache that seemed unresolvable. Rob loved his son profoundly. Yet that love was tinged with an undercurrent of urgency and desperation, as if he were perpetually navigating between a fragile thread of hope and an ever-present dread of ultimate loss. He did not witness Nick's growth unfold through steady progression, as he had with his other children, but rather through a recurring pattern of setbacks and painful stumbles that kept his heart in a state of perpetual unrest. From Nick's earliest years, an unspoken chasm existed between father and son, and they struggled to find common ground. Seldom sharing the interests or the natural rapport that Rob experienced with his other children, Rob found solace in structure, tradition, and established values. While Nick exhibited early signs of defiance and emotional instability, many evenings within the Brentwood home were spent in hushed silence, with Rob remaining awake, anxiously awaiting Nick's return, his gaze fixed on the slow crawl of the clock, repeatedly questioning his own adequacy as a father. By the time Nick reached the age of 15, the specter of substance abuse had entered his life. Initially experimenting with heroin and cocaine, he rapidly spiraled into a profound and unrelenting addiction. Rob and Michelle were compelled to endure the agonizing ordeal of witnessing their son cycle through rehabilitation facilities on more than a dozen occasions, succumb to periods of homelessness across various states, and narrowly escape countless near-fatal encounters. Each subsequent crisis struck Rob with the force of a fresh blow, constricting his chest with fear and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Desperate to extricate his son from the precipice, he ultimately resorted to what he perceived as tough love. Following professional counsel, Rob compelled Nick to enter rehabilitation against his will and made the heart-wrenching decision to sever financial support, harboring the hope that confronting the stark realities might serve as his son's salvation. The distance between them only widened, becoming a void filled with discord, animosity, and unhealed emotional wounds. There were periods when Nick opted for the uncertainty of the streets over returning to his parents' home. Meanwhile, Rob and Michelle lived in a perpetual state of dread, never knowing from one day to the next if their son was still alive. Contentious arguments, prolonged silences, and unspoken pain gradually exacerbated the divide, rendering any prospect of reconciliation seemingly unattainable. Then in the year 2015, the film Being Charlie emerged as a fragile glimmer of hope. Rob helmed the project, while Nick collaboratively penned the screenplay, a deeply personal narrative shaped by Nick's own lived experiences. This creative endeavor necessitated a direct confrontation between father and son, marked by heated exchanges but also by something entirely new. For the first time, their interactions transcended mere argumentation. They were genuinely listening to one another. Rob later reflected on this period with a painful honesty. There were moments when the tension erupted and we were shouting at each other, he acknowledged. But those confrontations compelled me to finally comprehend the weight of what Nick had been carrying all those years. Nick, too, recognized that collaborating on the film had initiated a subtle shift in their relationship, gradually mending fragments of a bond that had long been fractured. Yet, despite this progress, the underlying strain between father and son never entirely dissipated. Nick navigated periods of sobriety and, for a time, resided in the guest house on his parents' property, striving to re-establish a semblance of stability. However, beneath that precarious calm, mental health struggles persisted, and the threat of relapse remained a constant shadow. Michelle later confided in close friends that they had exhausted every conceivable avenue, and the emotional toll left both her and Rob profoundly depleted. Then came the evening preceding the tragedy, December 13th, 2025, at Conan O'Brien's holiday gathering. What should have been an occasion steeped in warmth and festivity took an unexpected turn. Rob arrived with Nick, and despite the cheerful decorations and jovial atmosphere, the palpable tension between them was undeniable. In the presence of stunned attendees, Rob raised his voice, openly chastising his son for behavior he could no longer countenance, his words laden with frustration and disappointment. The room fell into an eerie silence, as if an unspoken premonition of impending disaster had settled upon everyone. Nick retaliated, his eyes red-rimmed and unfocused. His disjointed sentences spilled forth years of pent-up anger, pain, and unresolved resentment into the open. This was no longer a typical familial dispute, but rather an explosive manifestation of suppressed anguish. It was the breaking point of a father-son relationship perpetually suspended between affection and suffering. In that moment, Rob uttered a brief yet devastating declaration. "I cannot continue to shield you if you persist in living this way." He then turned his back and departed, leaving Nick frozen in the midst of the holiday celebration, isolated beneath the festive lights. Many who witnessed the scene later recalled it as a somber foreboding. Perhaps that was the precise instant when the final thread snapped, when every attempt at reconciliation, every act of absolution, and the last vestiges of fragile hope crumbled in unison. Christmas night should have been a time of profound togetherness. Yet for Rob and Nick, it concluded in suffocating silence and exchanges of glances that no longer connected. On December 14th, 2025, the tragedy officially manifested. Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were discovered deceased in their Brentwood residence, victims of a shocking homicide. Hollywood found itself reeling, struggling to comprehend how a family once perceived as close-knit and exemplary could meet such a devastating end. According to preliminary findings, Nick Reiner was swiftly identified as the principal suspect, amid reports suggesting he was experiencing a state of mental instability exacerbated by addiction and years of suppressed fury. Authorities stated that during a moment of uncontrolled rage, Nick proceeded to the kitchen and retrieved a commonplace kitchen knife, the large blade that Michelle frequently utilized for preparing vegetables and meats. With that sharpened implement, he allegedly assaulted his mother first, inflicting grievous wounds that led to Michelle's rapid demise from substantial blood loss. Upon hearing the commotion erupt within the house, Rob Reiner instinctively rushed forward, driven by a primal urge to protect his wife. However, amidst the chaos, he too became a victim. Nick turned his aggression towards his father, inflicting fatal stab wounds to Rob's neck and chest. What ensued lasted mere moments. Yet, those fleeting moments were sufficient to transform a once loving sanctuary into a scene of unimaginable horror. At approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, Rob Reiner, the youngest daughter, returned home and made the horrifying discovery of her parents' lifeless bodies. She immediately contacted the police. Nick fled shortly thereafter but was apprehended within hours by the Los Angeles Police Department near the University of Southern California campus. He is currently being held without bail, facing charges of double homicide. Although the investigation remains ongoing, forensic sources have corroborated that the nature of the injuries is entirely consistent with the ordinary kitchen knife recovered at the scene. This tragedy marked the most devastating possible culmination for a family that had spent years grappling to break free from the grip of addiction and internal turmoil. When Nick was taken into custody, the weight of grief intensified. The public mourned not only the loss of Rob and Michelle, but also recoiled at the notion that the violence may have originated from deeply rooted familial wounds that were never afforded the opportunity to heal. If the allegations are substantiated, this case will stand as the most agonizing conclusion imaginable to a father-son bond once forged in love, patience, and precarious hope. As the holiday lights dimmed and the celebrations faded, what remained was a shattered family, a broken relationship, and unanswered questions that may forever persist. Yet even amidst such profound loss, one revelation cut deeper than all others. It came when Tracy Reiner, the adopted daughter, finally broke her long-held silence. Her words astonished the world, exposing the truth behind the tragedy as far more intricate than anyone had initially presumed. As Hollywood remained submerged in shock and sorrow, Tracy was the first to speak publicly following the deaths of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner. Her voice quivered, faltering as if each utterance reopened a fresh wound of memory. She conveyed that the pain had arrived with an abruptness and violence that left no room for anyone to prepare. Merely days before the catastrophe, she had still seen her father, still witnessed Rob alive, present, and exuding vitality, which rendered the loss all the more surreal. She could still vividly recall his laughter, still picture him engaged in discussions about the most mundane, ordinary details of existence. There had been no prior indication, no harbinger that such a horrific conclusion was even remotely conceivable. "I had just seen my father last week," Tracy recounted, tears streaming down her face. That single statement amplified the unyielding reality of the situation. In a brief exchange with NBC News, she struggled to contain the overwhelming shock that consumed her. "I come from the most wonderful family," she declared, her voice fracturing completely. "I am at a loss for words. I am still in disbelief." These were not pronouncements uttered for the sake of eliciting sympathy or attention, but rather the raw, unadulterated reaction of a daughter abruptly torn from a secure, familiar world she had always believed would endure indefinitely. Tracy described Rob and Michelle as the most exceptional parents a child could ever aspire to have. Rob, despite his deep immersion in films that would later achieve classic status, consistently placed his family above all other considerations. He instilled in his children principles of honesty, the importance of loving others, and the resilience to rise again after every setback. Michelle, possessing the gentle spirit of a photographer and producer, served as a quiet, steady presence, always attentive, always offering warmth and support when it was most critically needed. Together, they cultivated a home filled with laughter, even as they navigated unavoidable adversities. What caused Tracy the greatest anguish during the interview was addressing the subject of Nick. She explained that her parents held a profound love for him, perhaps even a more acutely painful love than for anyone else. Rob and Michelle perceived Nick as their most vulnerable child, the one requiring the greatest measure of protection, patience, and compassion. They always spoke of their immense love for Nick, Tracy recalled, remembering the persistent worry etched in their eyes. Even during the darkest periods, their words about him were a mixture of sorrow and enduring hope. They understood that Nick had borne burdens his siblings had never fully encountered, and that addiction had tragically stolen his youth and peace of mind. Consequently, in their final testament, they bequeathed Nick a larger portion of their assets, not as a reward, but as a quiet gesture of amends, a final message that conveyed, "You remain our beloved son, irrespective of circumstances." One evening, Tracy found herself alone in Rob's study, the room he held most dear. Upon the aged wooden desk, amidst unfinished scripts and well-worn pencils, she noticed a plain brown notebook, devoid of any title on its cover. It had evidently resided there for years, almost as if awaiting discovery. She hesitated, her heart pounding, then slowly turned the initial page. In that precise moment, she understood that she had just gained access to the deepest, most intimate recesses of her father's soul. The contents were notes intended for a screenplay, but they were also fragmented confessions saturated with anguish. Rob had written about Nick, his handwriting shakier than Tracy had ever witnessed. He confessed his profound regret for maintaining his distance during those prolonged months of rehabilitation, convincing himself that a stringent approach would somehow fortify his son. "Perhaps I was mistaken," he wrote. Perhaps what he truly needed was not discipline at all, but rather someone willing to sit beside him, even in quietude. Tracy's hands grew cold as she read, her tears falling onto the paper, blurring the ink. Page after page revealed the helplessness of a father compelled to witness his child descend further into darkness, utterly powerless to intervene. There is no torment greater than observing your own child suffer and being unable to alleviate that pain, Rob wrote. If only I could bear it for him, even for a single day. The words were unpolished, raw, and exposed like wounds that had never fully healed. One particular passage halted Tracy entirely. She found herself unable to proceed for a considerable time. Within it, Rob confessed his most profound fear, that Nick might harbor the belief that he had been abandoned. "If you ever perceive that your father does not love you, then that failure is mine," he penned. "I love you so intensely that I lack the understanding of how to express it correctly." Tracy sank into the chair, clutching the notebook to her chest, finally comprehending that her father's silence had never stemmed from indifference. It had been an internalized fear, deeply buried and left unarticulated. Yet, amidst all that regret, a fragile ember of hope still flickered. Rob wrote of a simple aspiration for Nick, not fame nor success, but a life sufficiently tranquil for him to find his breath. "If you can awaken one morning without harboring self-loathing," he wrote, "that alone would suffice for me." Upon reading this, Tracy surrendered to a complete breakdown. It was a truth her father had never managed to articulate directly to Nick. She recalled instances when Nick accused their parents of failing to understand him, of abandoning him during his moments of greatest need. Tracy had once retorted, incensed by those words. However, holding the notebook now, she perceived a far more tragic reality. 2 generations loving each other with every fiber of their being, yet perpetually failing to find the linguistic bridge to truly connect. On the final pages, Rob wrote what felt like a confession that would never reach its intended recipient. "I am sorry that I was not present when you required me." Tracy closed the notebook with deliberate slowness, as if any abrupt movement might irrevocably damage the words it contained. In the profound stillness of the room, she whispered, "Father loved Nick immensely. They simply lacked the knowledge of how to convey it to one another." The sentence dissolved into the silence, left unanswered, as if the very walls were attentive listeners. According to Tracy, the most profound tragedy lay not in the magnitude of what her parents had given, but in the fact that Nick had never truly perceived it. "They had loved Nick so dearly," she stated, her voice faltering as she paused to regain her composure, "but perhaps he never felt that love in the manner they had hoped. It was neither an indictment nor a judgment, but merely a quiet sorrow for opportunities that slipped away unnoticed and unacknowledged. For years," Tracy explained, Nick had harbored resentment towards his parents, believing they failed to comprehend him, were insufficiently present, and did not love him in the way he craved. Those accusations, sometimes erupting with explosive force, at other times festering silently, erected a barrier of distance that no one possessed the means to surmount. Rob and Michelle loved their son in the only way they knew how, while Nick yearned for something more. A more profound presence, a tighter embrace, a declaration that no one managed to utter in time. "They endured so much suffering," Tracy said softly. "But they never relinquished the hope that one day Nick would understand." In her estimation, Rob and Michelle were not merely parents, but human beings doing their utmost in an unmanageable situation, even when the cost was almost unbearable. "My father was not perfect," she stated quietly, "but he loved his children with his entire being." And it was that truth, she asserted, that made their loss more acutely painful than words could ever convey. As Tracy spoke, the closest members of the Reiner family also issued a formal statement, delivered through the youngest daughter, Romy Reiner, the one who had confronted the most devastating moment of her life head-on. In a concise statement conveyed to Variety, the words felt like a weary exhale released in the midst of an overwhelming tempest. "We are profoundly devastated by this sudden loss and request privacy during this incredibly challenging period." They bore the crushing burden of children orphaned in a single, unalterable day. Romy Reiner, a mere 28 years old, a young woman of considerable talent carving out a future in acting and screenwriting, was the one who arrived at the residence that afternoon. Residing in the vicinity, she frequently popped in for simple conversations to share fleeting, everyday moments with Rob and Michelle. These were the two individuals she had consistently cited as her paramount muses. Nothing about that particular visit hinted that it would deviate from the countless others that preceded it. No one could have possibly fathomed the brutal disruption that would befall their routine. Upon opening the door and entering the familiar Brentwood abode, Romy was met with a sight no child should ever be compelled to witness. Her parents lay still, bearing the gruesome marks of violent stab wounds. The shock rendered her speechless. Her body trembled, paralyzed by disbelief, as her mind seemed to drain into an immense, soundless abyss. Accounts from those intimately acquainted with the family indicate that Romy eventually sank to the floor in a corner of the house, weeping silently, her tears falling without a sound, as if even the slightest whimper might further shatter her already broken heart. That singular moment inflicted a profound psychological scar. Merely hours before, her parents had been alive, Rob, with his characteristic geniality and unforced smile. Michelle, with her soft demeanor and reassuring affection. Now, only emptiness remained, and a recollection so nightmarish it permeated every passing moment. Professionals specializing in mental well-being observe that such immense trauma can precipitate enduring consequences encompassing post-traumatic stress, persistent disturbing dreams, unwarranted self-blame, or a pervasive sense of emotional detachment from the world. Regardless of how collected or strong she may seem on the surface, Romy remains a young woman confronting the most catastrophic bereavement of her existence. In the ensuing days, her family swiftly convened Jake, Tracy, and their most cherished companions, forming a protective circle of solace around her. Nevertheless, everyone grasps the unvarnished reality. No pronouncements can alleviate such pain. A wound of this nature does not mend swiftly,